Hello everybody and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today is a very special day because we're going to be talking about the icon, the legend, the amazing person, Pat McGrath. I love her so much, and you guys know that here on my channel I love to do like your typical makeup tutorials, like just like videos talking about product, but then at the same time I have been delving into makeup history. I've been talking about runway makeup as well, and Pat McGrath, like, she just fits both of those themes so well because I consider her to be one of the most, if not the most, influential makeup artist in the world right now. And I hope that this video will just introduce you to her, and if you are already a fan of Pat McGrath as I am, you will probably find out some new things as well. If you want to see my sources, and if you want to see the sources for the images that I'm going to be using in this video, check the description box below. All the stuff will be there. I always like to credit where I get the information from because I always want to make sure that everything is correct. And anyway, let's get on with the video. You might have already heard of Pat McGrath's name in the YouTube sphere because she is the creative behind Pat McGrath Labs, which you guys might already recognize as being a really just like luxe and really high-end makeup brand. This is a brand that is known for creating really interesting formulas, really innovative formulas, if you will, and the packaging is everybody's like obsession whenever they buy the Pat McGrath Labs, of course, but she is the creative force behind that brand. But her career actually spans many years, even before Pat McGrath Labs, and that's what we're going to get into today. I actually did find a few interviews with Pat McGrath, which is quite rare because I have looked high and low, and for me, I haven't necessarily found many interviews at all that she has done, but a quote that I found to be really interesting from an interview that she did a few years back was an answer to the question, do you still think of yourself as a creative or a businesswoman? And she replied, and I quote, a mix of the two, everything at all times, but that is fine, I'm a Gemini. She is somebody that works mostly in editorial, and she also does runway. She has been known to do at least 80 runway shows a year, and she basically works with a huge selection of artists under her who study with her, who work with her, and help her create all these amazing beauty looks for so many different shows and editorials as well. She has worked with the likes of Rihanna and Kim Kardashian, to name a few, and she has also worked with advertising campaigns for Versace, Prada, Louis Vuitton, and Gucci. And again, this is just scratching the surface of her incredible resume. Going to these fashion shows involves her having a team of between 25 and 90 makeup artists, as well as huge loads of makeup products in different cases. And in an interview that I did find, she says that the most cases that they've taken of makeup is 87 cases. So 87 cases of makeup plus her army of makeup artists plus Pat McGrath. That is a performance. She also has a significant amount of storage for all her makeup products. Apparently she has more than 4,000 square feet of makeup storage, and whenever she goes into a department store or into a makeup store, she often finds herself buying nearly everything because she is addicted to makeup, and I quote, you couldn't get any more makeup addicted than me.
How gorgeous, the most delicious color.
Pat McGrath was born in 1970, and she was raised by a single Jamaican mother in Northampton in England. And she does credit her mother with instilling this love of makeup and fashion within her at a very young age.
I was lucky I was brought up by a mother that told me you can do anything you want. Luckily, I had a good imagination.
And I quote, my mother was obsessed with makeup. She would stand in front of the TV and we would have to guess what she had done differently with her eyes. I would think, get out of the way, but she wouldn't move until I told her. Pat McGrath and her mother would also analyze the makeup looks of old Hollywood film stars, and they would even look at runway shows on the television and pause to just analyze the makeup and the clothes and the entire look of the shows as they went down the catwalks. Something that is also really worth noting is at this time in 1970s, 1980s makeup culture, if you will, there really was almost no option for women of color or people who just had deeper skin tones when it came to makeup, because we look at the industry today and we find ourselves critiquing the lack of diversity or the lack of inclusivity. But think about this trope in the 1970s and 1980s. At this time, Pat McGrath and her mother were hard-pressed to find any kind of makeup that would suit their deeper skin tones. Pat McGrath's mother, Jean, even encouraged her daughter to mix up her own DIY versions of makeup products and to even add cocoa powder to lighter versions of makeup to make the makeup match their deep complexion. Pat McGrath's mother, Jean, also knew that adding heat to her skin would really make the foundation and the face products melt in and create a more dewy and more natural finish. And this is another quote directly from Pat McGrath. She always put on a full face of makeup, then got in the bath to get that dewy finish. It was next level, but this is where I got my makeup tips from at 7 years old. Pat McGrath's mother was also a very talented dressmaker. They would go to markets and find fabrics and make clothing, and they would also come up with makeup looks that would correspond or match to the clothes that they created. Again, finding makeup products on the market was very, very difficult for Pat McGrath and her mother because so many beauty brands concentrated on satisfying a market that was composed of people with lighter skin tones. Many of these products included talc, which was not necessarily the best ingredient to have if you were somebody who had a deeper skin tone, because it would give you a white cast if you had a deeper skin tone. Pat McGrath says, "There was no makeup for women of color. Nothing. That's what my mother's search was all about. When we were out shopping, we were always looking for a product that, probably by accident rather than design, worked for us, where there was no ashiness, no white cast." Again, that effect that was caused by the inclusion of talc in these makeup products. Probably from some makeup line that had either discontinued it or gone bust. During this time in the 1970s and 1980s, there was like a very big just craze for neutral just makeup, and you can probably see that if you look back at films and photographs captured during this time period. It was very just neutral and kind of I would say nude even. So because Pat McGrath and her mother could not find makeup products that were able to work on their skin, Pat McGrath decided to go for a more avant-garde approach with her makeup, which was something that was very much not common during this time. The teenage Pat McGrath would later get her big break when she was caught unawares wearing bold lipstick on her eyes, cheeks, and lips, whilst, this is a quote from her, stalking Spandau Ballet outside Radio 1. She was noticed by the presenter Janice Long, who apparently pointed at Pat McGrath's face and asked if Pat McGrath would be willing to do her makeup. And Pat McGrath at this time didn't even know that this was a job. Again, we look at makeup artistry right now as a really growing industry and as an industry that you can actually get into. However, we do recognize makeup as an industry because of social media, in my opinion. So think about, at this time, 1970s, 1980s, Great Britain, there's no social media, there's no really way to look at makeup as, I would say, a career. So Pat McGrath, very surprised, decided to go ahead and try it out. After this whole realization that makeup could in fact become her job, Pat McGrath would slowly but surely go on to work with a variety of individuals, musical artists, and even publications. She did work with The Face and 1D, and at this time, the 18-year-old stylist Edward Enninful, I hope I'm not butchering that last name, was working there as well. And if you don't know his name, he actually now is the editor-in-chief of British Vogue. But at this time, he was a stylist, and he was 18 years old, and they were a similar age, and they would connect, and they built a relationship that would last for years to come, and they still consider themselves good friends with each other. The two close friends would collaborate with one another, and at this time during the 1990s, Pat McGrath's artistry and her style really did stand out because, again, this was during the 90s grunge era, and her bold makeup looks were completely different from what anybody else was doing at the time. She would also work with Steven Meisel, which was again a partnership and a collaboration that would last for years to come.
Love Stephen. My whole life wanted to work with Steven Meisel, and even just to work once would be truly a dream come true.
So these two individuals, Edward Enninful and Steven Meisel, would, in a sense, help her just expand and really launch her career in what we see it as today.
She's the industry auntie, mom, everything. She does amazing makeup. She makes you look gorgeous, stunning. She's incredible.
Going into the 21st century, Pat McGrath was now working with a variety of really significant and powerful forces in fashion, such as the different Vogues, other really significant publications, and one of my favorite, Christian Dior. And she had worked with John Galliano to really create beautiful and noteworthy looks for his fashion shows. And one of my favorite images from the early 2000s when it comes to fashion are the stills taken at John Galliano's Dior shows, where you see like this really just like beautiful and just like really bright and colorful makeup that is absolutely beautiful and amazing.
I'm inspired by everyone. Everyone's, you know, a genius.
Pat McGrath has been known to draw inspiration from a variety of sources: films that she watched with her mother, also different editorials throughout history. She also likes to take inspiration from past works that she has done. And in addition to this, she also takes inspiration from just material things like gold leaf, feathers, and leather. She told Vogue in 2008, "I'm influenced a lot by the fabrics I see, the colors that are in the collection, and the girls' faces. It's always a challenge, but that is the key, to make it different every time." Even before she launched her brand, she was experienced with working with labs and makeup production. She actually helped a great many fashion brands create makeup lines as early as the early 2000s. These makeup brands included Gregorio Armani, Max Factor, Dolce & Gabbana, and CoverGirl Cosmetics. However, she wasn't necessarily confident in her ability to put her ideas towards a makeup brand of her own. And this is another quote from her. "I spoke to makeup executives about my own line for the past 15 years, and they would say, you know, nobody knows you, nobody really wants that kind of stuff you do in shows in real life." And then I joined social media, and all I'd hear from thousands and thousands of people was that they did. In 2016, Pat McGrath decided to expand her makeup creativity and launch a beauty brand. Now, this was known as Pat McGrath Labs, and their first launch, I remember it so like vividly. She actually decided to launch a product called Gold 001, and this was a product that had multiple uses, and you could use it wherever you wanted on your face. And it was also just apparently a concoction that she had created in the lab one day, and she decided that this was like the best gold that she had ever seen, and she decided to launch it. Now, there was a very like limited supply. I remember it launched, I think, around Paris Fashion Week in 2016, and it sold out in 6 minutes. And I think that apparently, from what I have read, she was very surprised that it was so successful, but it sold out so quickly. I remember I was way too young to like actually think of getting it because I just didn't necessarily have much money of my own. So I was like just like looking at this from afar, and at that time I was already just so like obsessed by Pat McGrath, and just like seeing this brand from what it started to what it is today is just so like mind-blowing to me. They did start out in their first few years as launching like really curated and just limited edition kits every few months. That's how they basically ran the brand for the first few years. But now a great many, if not most of Pat McGrath's makeup products are in fact permanent. I think that anybody that considers themselves a fan of Pat McGrath is of course very, very grateful that she went ahead and decided to launch her makeup line, because I think that her focus on the product and the formula and the colors, and also her decision to make sure that her brand is an inclusive brand, is an avant-garde brand, and is a brand that promotes multi-use and just makeup as an art, is just something that I'm so grateful to see on the market, and something that provides constant inspiration from me. If you're a long-time viewer on my channel, or if you've just been like on my channel for just like a little bit, you probably already have realized how infatuated I am with Pat McGrath Labs. I just look at Pat McGrath Labs as a brand that I strive to be able to purchase one day, because their stuff is a little bit on the more expensive side. And yes, I would love to purchase several of their eyeshadow palettes because I've heard so many great things. But I'm looking at Pat McGrath Labs as a line that I will someday be able to purchase. Not right now, but someday. And I still am just honestly like constantly just inspired by whatever Pat McGrath does, because I just consider her such an icon. And I think that a lot of people like to talk about the next Pat McGrath, or I've seen like a few people compare her to other notable makeup artists, and I definitely think that it's, I would say, well, this is probably just me being weird, but like this is, in my opinion, I think it's a little bit demeaning, and I think it's just a mistake to compare her to other artists, because Pat McGrath is somebody that is Pat McGrath. She is the best version of herself, and she's the best Pat McGrath that anybody else can be. And I don't think that anybody should be trying to compare themselves or others to Pat McGrath, because Pat McGrath is in and of herself an icon. And it's just really like, it's a waste of time, I think, to think about how she could be compared to somebody else, because I don't think that there will ever be somebody who is quite like her. There will probably be somebody who is completely different and an icon in and of themselves, but I don't think that Pat McGrath is an individual that deserves to be compared to other artists in that way. Today, she still is working really hard. She is working on her beauty brand, which has been valued recently at a value of over $1 billion. So she works on celebrities, she works on editorials, she works in magazines, she works with the photographers, and she also works on, like I said before, over 80 runway shows a year. And she apparently very much enjoys her work. When it comes to coming up new concepts for the runway shows, she says, and I quote, "I love to be challenged. I can spend a good hour or two in makeup trials, trying to make some concept a reality, but that's what I enjoy the most. I love it. I always lose my voice by the end of a show season, but this is something I'm obsessed with, something I've always wanted to do. It brings me joy. When you're at shows, there's a nervous energy. You want to make everything that you do perfect, because can you imagine seeing the clothing I get to see on a daily basis? It's exquisite. So the last thing you want to do is have the makeup let that whole collection down. It's pressure, but I love it." So that is pretty much where I'm going to end this video. If you are interested in seeing more of Pat McGrath's work, of course you can look her up, but know that I also do a runway makeup look videos on my channel every single fashion show. Well, not fashion show, every single fashion week and fashion month. So if you're interested in seeing any of Pat McGrath's work, and trust me, she does a lot of these shows, I'll consider checking out those videos. I'll put them in the cards, and know that if you subscribe, you can also see the videos that I do on that topic every single fashion month and fashion week. So that is pretty much where I want to end this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye, guys.